The Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation is dedicated to exploring topics of national and international importance and is proud to support Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff at the University of Maryland. From the University of Maryland, this is Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff. With the federal government spending more on education than ever, hopes are that student performance will finally improve after years of poor test scores. But can teaching alone overcome bad parenting, substance abuse, and the breakdown of families and communities? Are we asking too much of the nation's schools? To find out, Policy Watch is joined this week by William Bennett, former U.S. Secretary of Education under President Ronald Reagan, and host of the radio program Morning in America. Now, the host of Policy Watch, Doug Besheroff.
Bill Bennett, welcome to Policy Watch.
Thank you very much.
In 1981, before you were the Bill Bennett, you were Professor Bennett. How'd you end up in Washington?
There are two endowments, the National Endowment for the Arts. Well, there are three, the National Endowment for Democracy, too. But there's the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities. The Arts is the one with the pictures. I have nothing to do with those pictures. The Humanities is the one with the books, philosophy, literature, history. They told Ronald Reagan he had to have a professor of the humanities running the National Endowment for the Humanities. So I joke, sort of, that they began a nationwide search to find a professor of the humanities who had voted for Ronald Reagan. There were three of us in the country, and I was the second choice. That's how I got to Washington.
Let's go to the Department of Education, because most of us don't really know what the Humanities Foundation did and stuff. Although you were a university professor, your field was not education.
Right.
Now, I've taken some jobs when I didn't really know the lay of the land. When you first got there, what did you think?
The first mistake I made when I got to the Department of Education was to think I was in charge. And I was steering the ship, hopefully more to the right, because this was the Reagan administration. We won the election, and everyone was saluting and saying thank you. And then I went down and realized the ship was still moving in exactly the same direction it had been heading before. I'll tell you, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, and you certainly don't have to have a degree in education. Better that you don't, to understand education. I say to parents, if you don't understand what the teacher's talking about, you're probably right and they're probably wrong. It is Al Shanker, the great Al Shanker, used to say, and I really mean the great Al Shanker, not on everything, but on most things, used to say, Doug, that this is the only field whose professionals, once they have finished their training, say they are worse off because of it. Education is a thing that adults, caring and committed adults, naturally do with children. And it has become so arcane, so specialized, that it is a failure in a lot of places. There are some areas that need special work and special disciplinary work. My wife's area, special education, for example. But for the most part, we have over-professionalized, over-specialized in education and forgotten the basics.
Now, am I at this point supposed to say, is that unions?
It's partly unions. It's not, no, that part's really not unions. That's partly what you were talking to J. Dion about. That's partly culture. It's partly the cult expertise. The belief that in any field you have to become an expert, and expert means becoming more and more arcane in your work and more remote from common sense. George Orwell says sometimes the first obligation of an intelligent man is a restatement of the obvious, and there's nothing we need to learn more in education than to restate the obvious. For example, 63% of black fourth graders in this country cannot read at a basic level. I don't care how many Big Brother programs you have. I don't care how many scholarship programs, benefits like Best Friends, my wife's program, which you generously support. They're all great. But if you don't teach children how to read at an early age, most of them are finished professionally. And we know how to teach children how to read, but we're still having these fights in the schools about teaching reading.
If we know, and it's not entirely the unions, what's preventing us from doing what needs to be done?
You're egging me on about the unions.
Yeah, well, you don't have to do unions. I want come up with someone else to...
Look, the problem is I've had my big fights with the unions, the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers. However, the National Education Association, which is an extremely powerful group, when we go to Boston, E.J. Dionne and I go to Boston. We're both going. Lots of other people too to the convention. We will be talking to or see in the midst of 10 to 20% of the people there will be members of a teachers union or married to.
This is at the National Democratic Convention. At
the National Democratic Convention. Excuse me. Yeah. The problem with the union is that it's reactionary. It's resistant to change. Bilingual education in this country is largely a mess, a disaster. But because so many people have been trained in this, and there are so many jobs to protect, the system keeps going. But bilingual education was introduced by Herman Badillo, congressman from New York, from Puerto Rico originally. The idea was to help children learn English as quickly as possible. Now, as we have studied it, it turns out to be a system which keeps kids in their native language and doesn't help them learn English. I'll tell you how bad it gets. I talked to a parent the other day in a D.C. school. I said, public school. I said, how is the school? She said, pretty good except for some of the teachers. I said, why? She said, well, at our school we have to get our share of the really bad teachers because D.C. has decreed equitable distribution of the lousy teachers. Come on. You know, there shouldn't be any distribution of the lousy teachers except out.
Is this why you support charter schools
I support anything that will improve the system. I support merit pay for good teachers, but not for all teachers, just for good teachers, merit pay. I support the charter schools. I support school choice. I support giving parents more say in the education of their children generally, and I support math, English, history, science, art, and music, and in the first 3 grades, math and reading, math and reading, math and reading, because the research is clear.
There has been some criticism of No Child Left Behind legislation and the response to it because schools are turning to just that, which is math and reading and abandoning social studies, other topics.
Look, I think you know how I feel about social studies. I agree with Ronald Reagan. His farewell address, his last address was about the teaching of civics, and he talked about the importance of it, and it's very important now. We have to know why we fight, what we're defending, and what we're fighting against in this war on terror, and that means not only knowing the face of the enemy, but knowing our own face, and a lot of kids do not know what this country is all about. I'm writing a 1-volume, I hope, American history. I'm doing it right now. I hope it's 1 volume. It's too big for 1 volume now. No, I'm for that. I'm chairman of a company called K-12. We've put an entire curriculum on the internet, and that tells you what my courses are. English, history, music, math, art, and science. A lot of art and music. But in the first 3 grades, the emphasis is on math and reading, because reading not only predicts how you will do in reading and history and all those other subjects, it also predicts to a great degree how you will do in math. And the world in which we live, we have got to front load math if we have any hope of our kids competing with kids from all over the world. It's not for my sake, because I'm some old curmudgeon. In fact, I want more math than I got. I had a lot of math in high school, but then I was allowed to cheat in college by, not literally cheat, but by taking rocks for jocks, pseudoscience. We had an astronomy course at 8 in the morning, and the guy turned the lights out. We'd lean back, and that was it. And when you're paying the kind of tuition we paid at Williams College, they should have been giving me more science, real science, whether I wanted it or not.
You mentioned K-12 as a firm that you're involved in. I don't go into a lot of classrooms, but when I go into them, they don't look that different from the classrooms I was in as a kid, and that was a few years ago. Maybe there are some computer terminals in the back, but one doesn't see the 21st century reflected in American classrooms. Is that right?
That is right. We are still largely doing education the way we did it 100 years ago. And it's not an argument against something that it's old, and it's not an argument for something that's new. Matter of fact, one of the things that bedevils American education is people think innovative means good and traditional means bad. Good means good and bad means bad. There are some things that we've done traditionally we can continue to do. Memorization, by the way, which fell out of favor. Memorization is actually a very good thing. The research is clear. It increases your mental powers. your mnemonic skills. You remember what you remember. It strengthens the brain. And kids actually, although they protest, they actually like it a couple of years later, being able to recite. So it's making its headway back.
What role does technology play? What could it play?
Well, the kids, that may have been unfair, but when you go to a computer show, a technology show at a school, if it's open to everybody, watch what happens. The kids run to all the machines. The adults approach gingerly. And when adults touch these things, they're worried they're going to break them, Kids just jump in. It's like a rollerboard or, roller skates or whatever, because they're comfortable with it. Everybody's kids, grandkids, knows how to get on these machines. By gosh, they're on these machines too much. Can't we take advantage of their know-how there to teach them something? Absolutely. I would argue, I communicate more with my kids. I still have relatively young kids, 15 and 20, on email than we do on the telephone. Because this is their generation. This is the way they do it. We instant message. I prefer spelling to be part of this, but you can't have everything, right? You can't have everything.
That's part of the style.
Right.
Ignore the spelling. I want to go back to what you said a moment ago about African American children, and modify the context just a moment. We talk about how poorly African American kids are doing, but there's actually a division between boys and girls, and it spills over into white boys and girls as well. I think it's 53% of college admissions are now girls for all American youngsters. 57%, I think, of African American admissions are girls. Are there some special problems developing or have developed for the boys, especially African American boys?
There are problems with the boys. A lot of our attention's been focused on the girls, and whether the girls were getting equal treatment in math and so on. But the evidence is pretty clear that in many ways we have a much more serious problem with the boys. My niece just graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, big state university, good state university. 62% women, 38% men. Now, she bemoaned this partly for social reasons, But,
sounds pretty good if you're a male student there.
Yeah, but there are things larger than that in life. As I have to instruct you as well as she. Anyway, the juice is still with us. Okay. Anyway, we are still alive and well. It's a problem. At Chapel Hill, for the most part, not counting legacies and other things, they take the kids by the scores, by the numbers, their SATs, their recommendations, their grades, and the girls are outperforming. We're not sending many of the right messages to many of our boys about achievement and the value and importance of achievement. We're sending, or at least that kind of achievement. We're talking about the messages they're getting, ingesting, and acting on. Too many of them are not the right ones.
I have a number of times been in front of inner city schools at 3 o'clock or whenever school is coming out, because I'm going into the school for something else. The girls coming out at all ages are carrying books home. You can predict the age of the boy, right, by how many books he's carrying home. The very young ones have books. By the time it looks like they're in the 5th grade or 6th grade, we're lucky they're going to the school, but they're not going home with books. Is anybody focusing on these problems for the boys? Yes,
some people. We don't think we know the answer yet, but Christina Hoff Summers has done some work. She's a colleague of yours, I think, colleague of yours, on the trouble with the boys, or the trouble with boys. And some other people have looked at it too. It is exacerbated if we put both factors, if you put race and gender. If you're talking 62-38 in terms of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the last numbers I looked at for black enrollment in higher education were something like 72-28 or 70-30 black women to black men, and that's an even more extreme problem. Does it have to do with the breakdown of the family, absence of father figures? Does it have to do with the culture, the messages we're sending in movies and television and elsewhere? What about the dominance of other kinds of pictures in kids' minds, in boys' minds? That the picture of cultural achievement and intellectual achievement isn't as prominent. My friend Jaime Escalante, the great teacher from Los Angeles, used to say, I'm recruiting math students like they recruit basketball players. I get the kids in the 7th grade and I say, hey, you're pretty good in the fractions. I'm recruiting you for my high school calculus program. We need to be doing more of that.
I remember when you were Secretary of Education and you said the schools have to take the children as they come without worrying about the parents. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, I'd like the parents on our side as well. You just mentioned about family breakdown. Isn't that part of the educational puzzle right now?
Sure it is. Look, give me better parents and I'll give you better kids. And I don't even need better churches or better schools. It would be helpful to have them, but better parents. You know, we did the study of the kids graduating at the top of their class in California high schools in the 80s. A lot of these kids were boat people. They came to the U.S. not speaking English, dirt poor. But we did a study. Of course, you got to do a study. So we did a study. And it turned out, as the people who wrote the study, I'm smiling, said, student attitudes have a great deal to do with parental direction. As we'd say, duh. If you teach them, it'll make a difference. So the values in these dirt poor families were educational achievement, hard work, and family cohesiveness. That translates into good behavior on the part of the kids. So absolutely. The thing I learned, though, by going to the schools, it was my wife who sent me to the schools, Doug, was that I was wrong. I thought family and genes were destiny. But I went to schools where I saw teachers taking kids who had virtually nothing in terms of their natural abilities, talents, and bad backgrounds, and turning them into real students and productive citizens. The miracle workers, the heroes, the principals, the teachers, people I invited to Washington to have lunch with the president.
That's very, very good to hear.
They need more money.
Are there places that are trying to involve, schools especially, trying to involve the parents more, change their attitudes, or is that just not doable?
It is doable by smart people. Smart principals involve parents. One of the best schools I ever visited was the Language Academy of Southside Chicago. Amy Weiss was the principal. And when you went to her school, you saw about 500 adults, 150 faculty. The rest, she said, are my unpaid adjunct faculty. Guess who they were? Parents. She said, you can't pay people enough to do what parents will do out of love. Just ask them. She said, but a lot of teachers and parents teachers and administrators are threatened by parents, so they don't want them around. She said, I want them around. I need more help. And they'll do anything. They'll paste, they'll glue, they'll empty the garbage. For their kids, they will do anything. And parental involvement, sound academic program, high expectations, homework, safety, you get good results. I don't care what the input is from the kids. You have those factors, you'll get good results.
You also wrote a book called The Broken Hearth, and it addresses directly these kinds of questions about the strength of the American family. And you talk in there about the astronomical increase in out-of-wedlock births, high rates of divorce. I read the book, and then I read the chapter about what to do about it twice. And I didn't think
there wasn't much there.
Wasn't much there.
It's I'm a policy guy. I've had these government jobs, and I was thinking in terms of policy, and I couldn't come up with much, frankly. I think it's not a bad idea to encourage marriage in the tax code. I think that's a good idea. I think we should discourage divorce. I don't think it should be quite so easy. I think we should have some kind of, states should, I think, experiment with this, but some kind of pre-marriage counseling program. We have it in our churches. We have it at our church, pre-Cana counseling sessions so people know what to expect. And did you know that a lot of people going into marriage expect bliss and harmony? Somebody wrote the other day, it was a very funny review. He said, you're promised happiness, right? Not quiet, not peace, happiness. They're different. All right, anyway. So I think unrealistic expectations. But we have become way too casual about marriage. It's gone from a sacred thing, a sacrament, to a contract, to a kind of agreement, a kind of nod of the head. I remember in the early 70s, one of my students invited me to a wedding with another one of my students. And they said, we want you to come to the wedding. We love each other for now. We'll stay married for as long as it feels good. Come if you want. We sent paper plates. You know, if you're not serious, we're not serious. But this is a very serious matter. Because divorce, I went through 4 of them. My mother was divorced 4 times. And the first one was the hardest because we were the youngest. But it is the death of a small civilization, and it's disruptive. And sometimes it's necessary. But I have friends, relatives. A lot of people get divorced way before necessary. They get divorced because somebody they like is more attractive, it's a little uncomfortable. The voice is starting to bother me a little bit after 20 years. You know, I mean, we're not taking it as seriously as we should. I hoped by the end of the book, people would be convinced enough of the value of marriage, materially, physically, in terms of health, in terms of people's happiness. You know, one amazing statistic in the book, not my research, others' research. 80% of people who wanted to divorce, 80% of people who wanted a divorce and who were persuaded not to, 5 years later said they were very happy. You know, life goes up, life goes down. You have good days, you have bad days. You have good weeks, you have bad weeks. In marriages, you can have good years and bad years. It's different when the kids are little. Then they're big. When they're little, you're a husband, you disappear. You're nobody. You're a piece of furniture. At least I was. I held things. Because the focus is on the kids. They get a little bigger, then you engage. You know, you're doing more. And, I mean, marriages go through these cycles. So I don't know what to do policy-wise except to encourage it, reward it in the tax code. I think that's fine. Do something with the courts and so that it's a little harder. And I don't know what else to say.
So you started this talk radio thing called Morning in America.
Yes.
Now, the first thing I should mention is you were on 6 hours ago.
Yeah, I get up at 3:30. My show is 6 to 9 in the morning.
So, how do you like talk radio?
I like it a lot, but I should tell you ours because people, know conservative talk radio, and there are some great and hugely influential people out there. But ours is a little different. We pitch it a little higher, and we don't yell at people. There's no yelling. And we don't call people names, and we have liberals and Democrats and libertarians and conservatives and Republicans. And I think it's working. I don't think I'll ever get to 10 million. But if I could get to 1 million or 2 million, it would be great. I had the drug czar on today. We had Richard Pearl last week. We had Alan Dershowitz, Ed Koch, Jim Woolsey. We have writers and thinkers and book authors, and we pitch it pretty high.
This is a serious question.
Yes, sir.
People say that liberal talk radio isn't fun to listen to and can't be fun to listen to. First, compared to conservative talk radio. First, do you think that's true? And if so, why do you suppose that is?
Well, I'll be jocular about it first. Conservative, when you give a lecture to a conservative audience, people will take notes. But liberals know they're smarter than everybody else, so they don't have anything to learn from anybody. So they don't listen. People call me up and say, "Good point." I've listened to the Franken show. They don't do that very often. It's different. So I don't know why it is, but they've had a heck of a time. I launched the same time as Al Franken. Air America and Morning in America launched at about the same time. By the way, just very quickly, when I showed up at college, my son took my son to college, Princeton. First person I ran into was Al Franken, who was taking his son to Princeton. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "We can come here. We can come here." Said, "The faculty's liberal." I said, "We can come here. It's all right."
People think that talk radio, especially conservative talk radio, has been an important political factor in the last few elections. You agree?
Huge. It's huge. I talked to a guy named David Galernter. David? He's a professor at Yale. He's a professor of computer science, one of the smartest people I know. He is best known for being the first target of the Unabomber. A brilliant guy, writes on technology. And he helped me in K-12 set up this technology for this education company. I said, the Internet's the most powerful instrument in the world now, isn't it? He said, no, radio. Radio is. I said, Al-Qaeda? He said, Internet and radio. Bad guys as well as the good guys. Conservative radio has been a hugely powerful instrument. And, when you're talking, Rush Limbaugh is talking 18, 20 million people a week. That's a lot of influence. And people listen for a long time, and they take notes.
Does liberal talk radio have a chance?
I think so, if it can be a little looser, a little more, if you can laugh at yourself a little more, instead of laughing at making fun of other people, which was the problem, I thought, with a lot of the liberal talk radio I have listened to. You need to be able to, laugh more at yourself and be a little looser about your views, which, not looser. You just have to be, chill out a little more on your views. But if you're going 3 hours, you can't be going at high intensity, high speed anyway. That's been the problem with the liberal talk radio I've heard. I like Alan Colmes. I know a lot of people don't. I like his manner. I like his gentlemanliness. I like his decency.
Well, on a positive note like that, Bill Bennett, let me thank you for being on Policy Watch.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This program was produced by the University of Maryland, which is solely responsible for its content. The Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation is dedicated to exploring topics of national and international importance and is proud to support Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff at the University of Maryland.
We are PBS.